Okay, Mayor, thank you very much for joining us today. It's still weird to think of you as the ex-mayor, but you've been an ex-mayor for a little bit now. Let's start off, if you would, with what we've called the worst real estate deal of all time. And we'll get to some of your accomplishments and talk about your legacy a little bit. But I do want to ask you about 101 Ash, particularly in light of this potential run for governor, right? Where we've been critical of this governor and other governors for not keeping a tight lid on some of these state agencies. There's been all sorts of problems with EDD, with DMV. I mean, you can kind of go down the alphabet soup. And so you kind of hope that you have someone in the governor's office who can manage these problematic agencies well. So what happened with real estate assets department? And you brought in a director when you started as mayor to kind of right that ship. And then clearly she left in disgrace with 101 Ash dominating headlines. What happened there? Why was that such a mess and a nightmare?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Matt. And thanks to everybody for joining. And yes, it does feel odd as the ex-mayor a week and a half into it, but I'm sure it'll sink in. But let me jump right in on that. Particularly, I think some issues go very well and some don't. It's how you address it and how you fix it. But I will tell you straight away, Matt, I think that it's clear on that issue that we overestimated our ability as a city to do that real estate and to do that rehabilitation, which was not a core competency of San Diego. And I was pretty outspoken about that. And a goal, to ensure that we had a place for 1,000 employees to have a workspace, bring them in from different places across the city that weren't functioning very well. A place for a one-stop shop for development services, and a goal to save tens of millions of dollars by consolidating leases into a building that the city would own. And so that's the spirit in which the staff brought that project forward. I think was important for us to do. And it's still, I think, vital to have that type of space for employees and consolidation and public access going forward. But it's really about how you fix it when there's a problem. This was not executed well, Matt. It wasn't. And so when it came to calling for the independent review, when it came to stopping payment, obviously, which was very important to me, how do we protect taxpayers? How do we not let this happen again? And how do we make sure that we're gonna fix this? And so obviously some of that is in both in the legal aspect now in terms of insurance, I should say, and holding folks accountable because there was a lot of things that went wrong on the rehabilitation of that, and there's no excuse for it. And so that was my job as mayor, was to say, all right, how do we fix this? What's it gonna take to turn this around? And I think most importantly, how do you fix it for the future going forward?
Helen, I know this issue has been brought up before, but in much of the coverage, it's referenced that Doug Manchester was involved in this deal, and he's often listed as one of your more prominent, wealthy, kind of frequent donors. What should San Diegans think of in terms of someone like yourself as a gubernatorial candidate or as their mayor?
My job, straight up, man, my job is to always put the interests of the city of San Diego front and center. And that's what I've done. And you will have folks that have supported me, not supported me on different sides of the issue. And that was certainly the case on many things. I look back to the work that we did with the city attorney, with the San Diego State, driving a hard bargain and driving a hard deal. Obviously, a lot of the folks that I've worked closely with as a proud alum for years. I look at the work that we've done on driving a very hard bargain and hard deal with San Diego Gas and Electric, and taking from what was a $50,000 franchise fee years ago to now $80 million. So, my job is always going to be to drive that hard bargain, no matter who's on the other side of the table, because I will tell you, I had one goal when I was mayor. My job was to represent taxpayers. My job was to do the right thing for the city. I feel very strongly about that. That gets to how you approach everything. That gets to doing the right thing. And that is always the approach that I took as mayor on every single issue.
How would you grade your own mayoral term or terms?
Well, even I'll let others I'll let others make the grade, and particularly it's a little odd to talk about legacy type of stuff when you're talking about yourself. But Matt, I think we did an excellent job, and I think we did an excellent job, particularly when I think back to that first time when I got elected. Our city was in the news for all of the wrong reasons, right? On late night TV, trust in government was low. We had real problems at City Hall. I said from the very beginning, my job was to bring back integrity to City Hall and to do it in a way that focused on solving problems, doing it in a way that brought people together. As I think from covering me, and we have enough partisanship on the national level. My job was, it's not about Republican or Democrat. What's the right thing that we should be doing as a city? And to treat people with dignity and respect, even if you disagree on what that is, to actually achieve results. And so that was, the situation that I came into at a very, very difficult time where the city, I think, Matt, had lost sight of what was important in terms of where we're spending our dollars, how we're investing in infrastructure, how we're doing neighborhoods. I will answer that question. Our city's in a much better spot than when I came in.
How about on homelessness? I went down to the office for the first time in months recently and drove around downtown, and it is, obviously it's a bit of a ghost town because of the pandemic, but it seemed like there were more homeless people walking around, more tents. I know that's one of the things that you have taken credit for and deserve credit for is the homeless situation. But it seems like we're at a turning point again. And how much of that responsibility, obviously, again, there's a pandemic going on. So everything needs to be seen in that way. How much of that is your responsibility?
How much of what, Matt? I'm sorry. What was
of the kind of, it seems like the homeless situation is, kind of teetering again because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think there's real challenges. It's one of the things that I've talked with Mayor-elect Gloria on, which is really continuing the tone that I tried to set was really a bias towards action and doing things differently. San Diego has become a leader on homelessness because we've taken a different approach. We're the only, county in California where homelessness has actually gone down over the last 2 years by double digits. A lot of people get the credit for that. But I really tried to set the tone of working with not just the city, but the county, with our providers, and doing things differently. And I think probably most importantly, the change that became very clear to me, Matt, after a few years into the job, was we cannot wait for universal consensus on an issue that it will never exist on. And that was back to what are we going to do to actually make things different and get people off the street, and not just for a night or a week, but how do we get them off the street, get them that help and the support we need so they can get that place of their own. And that really was fundamentally why we changed and put on the bridge shelters that we established, room for 1,000 people a night, which did not exist before. And as I think you remember, I said, I'm going to pick the locations of those bridge shelters. I'm not going to wait for universal consensus because you're always going to get neighborhood pushback. And I've said, we're going to need to help people. We need to help people now. You get a lot of criticism because folks say, well, I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. And I said, we can't do things the same way because it wasn't working. But I think it's been proven to work. And we've helped a lot of people. That's why San Diego, I think, rightfully is in that leadership position. We established safe parking zones, as I think, for both cars and RVs. We tripled the capacity in terms of our storage shelter for folks to put their belongings in. We created the neighborhood policing division, which I feel very strongly about and helpful in terms that we're making sure that we can get people connected to those services and insist that we have a bottom line in our neighborhoods, in our business districts. We've had a fundamental shift in San Diego. It hasn't been easy. But as I look to the momentum that we have created, we still have a lot of work to do as a city. But I look at that positive trend and how it's gone down, and the work and the struggles we had to do to get them done. It was worth doing. There's a reason that we've had probably about 13 different cities that have come to San Diego to tour the bridge shelters, to see the system that we've created, that have toured what's happening at the convention center. Because my overall goal, again, was not just to get somebody off the street for a week, but how do we provide those wraparound services that gets them that place of their own? And particularly that's important because, as we know, about 65% of individuals that are homeless have either mental health or substance abuse issues. So we need to provide that support, and that's going to be ongoing. So we've really changed the paradigm in San Diego. We need to do more, but it's working, and I think that's been a real positive in light of a very difficult situation.
And I do think, again, that you deserve credit, as you said, relative to other cities. San Diego's homeless situation seemed to turn a corner there, at least for a little while. But I wanted to ask you, the impetus for that seems to me that it was the hepatitis A debacle, right? Which I think we've criticized you and the county for kind of moving slowly on that. In hindsight, how would you have approached that differently? And it's interesting. It was kind of prologue to what we're all dealing with now with this pandemic, right? There's some parallels to be drawn between the two.
Well, first of all, hepatitis A and the outbreak, man, it was a tragedy, absolute tragedy. And the question that I asked myself, and you're right, it hit us particularly hard in the city of San Diego, but a countywide outbreak. What do we need to do differently? What are the actions that we need to take? And how do we take those actions now and decisively, because lives were at stake? And so, look, I think for decades, the city and the county did the bare minimum. And I couldn't wait for consensus. These were our streets. These were our folks that needed help. And we needed to change everything. Everything changed with Hep A. Since then, we have built a stronger relationship with the county. When I think of what we did in terms of the vaccinations out there, the city and the county working together, going out, not just in the streets, but out into the riverbeds and other things. We had one goal: how do we keep people healthy, and how do we keep people safe? I think that helped with the relationship that we have now with the county that I think has never been stronger. And how do we tackle regional emergencies? And when it came to COVID, we said from the very beginning, there shouldn't be any daylight between the city or the county. We have one goal, which is to keep San Diegans safe. Let's work in lockstep. Let's communicate in lockstep. And so all of the work that we've done as San Diegans, as the county, people don't know the difference between jurisdictions, right? They don't know what's the county's responsibility and the city's responsibility. They just know that we want it to work. And so I think hepatitis A really made us see that we need that bias towards action. And I think, Matt, that was a fundamental sea change. And we need that same bias towards action on homelessness across the state of California right now.
Oh, and switching gears to another subject, I just wanted to cover a couple more subjects before I open it up to the board for other questions. But you've also been given credit for expanding the ranks of the police force, which I think is important. Obviously, much is made of San Diego's low crime rate, a historic low.
Yeah.
But I want to key in on the racial disparities and stops. That is a issue that kind of the attention on it kind of comes in waves. How much of that is falls on your shoulders? Obviously, you chose the last two chiefs. Is that something that you should have done more to reduce?
Well, it's incredibly important, and particularly because from a standpoint that everybody absolutely must always be treated equally when doing law enforcement. We have to insist upon that. And people need to see that they have a police department that not only keeps them safe, but is going to treat them with dignity and respect. And that goes regardless of your race, ethnicity, sexual preference, anything. We must have a police department and must strive for that. So it's absolutely non-biased and continue to take those actions and reforms when necessary. What I was always talk about, and I think Chief Zimmerman actually said this well, what's best practices today won't be best practices 5 years from now. And you better make sure that you have the culture of your police department that understands that and is constantly looking at ways to change and ways to do that. You know, that's one of the reasons why the department is going through right now is they've engaged the Center for Police and Equity to really take a look at an independent analysis of the data that was collected at the San Diego State study, to once again look at what is happening actually on the street, what are our practices, how is that working, what are the changes that we need to do, and to make those reforms. And I really tried to make as part of my tenure that we have to be a safe city. We have to have a police department that our neighbors can trust in. And you know, my very first day in office, I made a change at the top of the police department, as I think you remember, when I appointed Chief Zimmerman, the first female police chief in the history of San Diego. We unfortunately had some officers that were not doing the right thing. We needed that change at the top. And that's why we made those changes. And then I had the opportunity, obviously, when she retired, to hire Chief Nislak. Both of them, I think, have extraordinary integrity. Both of them who are not afraid to step up and make change when they needed to. And I will call to the issue, particularly as you look back this past summer. And the chief came to me right at the beginning of the outrage that all of us saw with George Floyd. And he said, Mr. Mayor, I think the time is right for us to move on banning the carotid restraint. That had been an issue that had been around. He said, we need to do that now. And we did it. And so our police department led. You saw the sheriff followed afterwards, then you saw the state followed after our lead. That's the tried culture, Matt, that I tried to instill, because it begins and ends by being a safe city. If you do not have a safe city, if you do not have the trust and support of your neighbors and your neighborhoods, you don't have anything. And yes, we were, as you rightfully pointed out, named one of the safest big cities in the country. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by men and women that are out there, right, putting on the badge every day. And so I spent a lot of time in making sure that we invest in that. That's why I was such a strong opponent when folks were saying we want to defund our police department. No, we needed to make sure that our officers actually have the training and the support necessary to do the job. And as you know, when we came in and we saw we were in the midst of officers leaving the city of San Diego for other departments, we made a real push at the city council, bipartisan push, that said, we want to recruit and we want to retain the best men and women that we can. And so to do that, we need to be competitive. And that's why we put additional dollars into the department budget to make sure we have those men and women and they don't leave our city, and that they're vested in the type of response that San Diegans deserve and expect. And so as we have seen that grow and increase, I think that's been incredibly important. And it's incredibly important for all parts of the city to know that you're going to have a police department that you can trust, to know that you have to have a police department that's going to be there when you call 911, that's going to answer the call, and to know that you have a department that is constantly going to be able to assess and has that culture that says we always have to be looking at how we're going to do things differently. That was one of the key things that I really tried to instill in both Chief Zimmerman and Chief Nislak, who I will tell you, I think have really done a remarkable job.
Mr. Mayor, probably 6 times over the last 3 or 4 years, I've gotten phone calls from out of city journalists asking me, is Kevin Faulconer really going to run for governor in 2022? And I would always tell them, I think that's really kind of highly unlikely. We've had some really good Republican candidates for statewide office, and no one can ever get more than 46%. It's kind of futile to run unless your name is Arnold Schwarzenegger or unless you're running against Cruz Bustamante, the least popular Democrat in the party. And yet you seem to be quite serious about this. What makes you think you can escape the 46% cap that has been the case for all of these really qualified candidates, the mayor of Fresno, the guy from Pepperdine? I mean, we've had some really strong Republican statewide candidates, and they haven't come close.
I appreciate that, Chris, and I am giving it serious consideration. And the reason is because I think some of the issues that are not working well with our state right now, we're headed in the wrong direction. And I'm happy to tick through some of those. But as I think you know, the demographics of the registration of the state of California mirror those of the city of San Diego. And having been re-elected twice, and even go back to my council days, where I got elected in a majority Democrat council district, and now in the city of San Diego with Republican registration at 24 and 25%. How do you win? You win by addition. You win by the power of your argument. You win by the power of issues and what you want to do to change those. And so I think that as I look at when I ran for mayor, it wasn't about partisanship. It was about leadership and what I wanted to do and how I was going to actually approach and fix things. I think that same approach can absolutely work in California. It's not about whether you have an R or D next to your name, but it's about what are you going to do to help reduce homelessness. It's about what are you going to do to actually help keep businesses growing in California. It's about what you're going to do to help keep California safe. So I think a lot of those things, it really, to me, that's what Californians want. That's what San Diegans have wanted, as I said. So I think it's about what are the problems and the issues rather than some of the partisanship.
In 2017, the LAO put out a report that said California will never solve its housing crisis until the public, by and large, accepts the arguments that things need to change radically. And our letters to the editor are overwhelmingly opposed to the kinds of things that we're trying to do to help things like small houses and changing in zoning and making it easier. So it just seems to me like the hidden issue of the housing crisis is that our leaders have identified it as a real problem. Our leaders, starting with Scott Wiener and Jerry Brown, have said we should do this, that, and the other to do it. But there's simply no public support for it in any kind of a broad sense. And so it just kind of makes me feel like the whole thing is futile. We're stuck. How can we change this?
I will agree with you on some of the climate issues, but you have to push through that. You have to say yes to housing. And I've been very vocal on that, as you know, particularly over the last several years. If you don't say yes to housing, right, the alternative is more homelessness, more unaffordable costs, more Californians that are going to leave our state. So we have to say yes to that. And it's why we worked so hard on what is it that we need to do, obviously, as a city, to bring the ideas of housing and community together for policies that we can actually get across the finish line. But I think most importantly, Chris, policies that actually will work to be an incentive to create new housing. And so my philosophy is, it's always been in the past, it's about, neighborhoods and versus new housing. No, but why we tried to change that dynamic, particularly with our complete communities plan, which just got approved, as you know, the last month. If neighborhoods, we tried to change that dynamic to say, if neighborhoods can get some more housing, then these neighborhoods should get better in terms of investment in streets and in parks and other public amenities. And so that is how I approached it. And I'll tell you, I was particularly struck by a couple of years ago, it really helped galvanize me. A woman that I met in Ocean Beach was, at the time 99 years old. She's 101 now. Betty, who was being forced out of her apartment. She didn't really care about NIMBYs or YIMBYs, right? She cared about how can she stay in her house? How can that be afforded? What was she going to do? And so I've really tried to put that focus on how can we create more housing because we have to. And when I look at the community plan updates that we've done, I made that a real priority. And why that's important is because it says, here's where we want growth and development to occur. And here's where, most importantly, where we don't. And let's match that with a community-wide EIR so you have the ability to actually construct the units and construct the housing. Let's actually provide the incentives to do that. And so as you know, with the plan that we had for our accessory dwelling units that have been increased now more than 300%, the incentives we put in that says if you're going to build apartments in transit areas, you don't have to build parking if you don't want to, because that will lower the cost of the apartments. How can we actually build units that San Diegans can afford? And that was the genesis behind Complete Communities, and why it took the year and a half that it did, because we did a citywide EIR. Because I've seen time and time again how CEQA is used as a weapon to stop good quality projects from getting across the finish line that provide the housing that we need. So we did that upfront work. We've said, here's where we're going to provide those incentives and density and height along transportation corridors. And San Diego is absolutely going to be a leader. And I can tell you that the Complete Communities was really a microcosm on my time on the council. And I've worked, as I said, with a majority city council the entire time that I was mayor. And we've had that healthy exchange of ideas. And that's okay, and that's good, because how do we have that balance that protects our neighborhood character, of which we hold so dearly in San Diego? But how do we also look to the future so our kids, my kids, can actually afford to stay in California now? How do we actually get something across the finish line? And so while we've seen, and I think you rightfully point out in the state, a lot of things not actually happening, bills dying, I've tried to set the tone in San Diego. Let's work together. Let's actually get policies across the finish line. And going back to your first question, Chris, I think that's why we need more of a balance up in Sacramento. That's why I've said I don't think one party rule is healthy. And I think that competition of ideas and approaches would serve our state very well.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that? I mean, I do think that the community plan updates are good. I think they add nearly 100,000 housing units potentially.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
Potentially is the key word, right? It's one thing to have it on paper. It's another to put, 4 walls and a roof over a family's head. So
100% right, Matt. And
this
that's
is
why.
what we
That's
know
why
when the governor
both are
was,
important.
when this current governor was elected, he I forget the number, hundreds of thousands of homes he said needed to be built. And as Jeff pointed out in our interview with him, that would make, put Shanghai's up and down California. So I guess my question to you is, and maybe time will tell, but do the policy changes, do the community plan updates, where does the rubber hit the road? When will we see more houses, and what is that going to take? Is it only a matter of time and construction, or is there something more to be done?
I think there will take some time, Matt, and I think, and you're right about why the community plans were so important, because you need to set that thing that says, okay, we have the right to actually do that now and to develop that. And that's why that back and forth was so important. So you have the updates that you need to do. And then that's why the Complete Communities, which provides the ability to do it by right, to add the incentives for density, to add the incentives for height in our transportation corridors and areas. So it will take some time, obviously, for the market to now take advantage of that. Again, Complete Communities just passed a month ago, but that was the result of a year and a half of effort and probably 2.5 in the planning. But we're making some fundamental changes. And I'll tell you what, I think particularly as I look ahead to the Midway area and what's going to be possible out there. This board supported, obviously, Measure E, which I was a strong supporter of as well. I think that's the fundamental change that we need. Now we have that changes. I think if we were going to get back on the Zoom call in 5 years, we're going to see a dramatically different Midway area. And I think we're going to see very positive developments in housing in a lot of our transit areas across San Diego.
Mayor, quick question for you. How do you, especially now that you've just confirmed for us that you are considering running for governor in the future, how are you going to convince people of color in San Diego to vote for you and to support you? What have you done in your tenure to make lives better for marginalized communities and people of color in San Diego?
No, thank you for that question. And, I'm really going to point to the results that we've done in San Diego, and it can't just be rhetoric and lip service. I set the tone when I ran for mayor that it was going to be one San Diego. And what I meant by that was that our city truly can't be great unless every neighborhood is getting their share of city services and attention. And that, in my opinion, was not happening before. And so as we fundamentally changed how we invested in neighborhoods, and particularly in those neighborhoods that had been underserved, as we changed the way, just as an example, we did street repair, took the politics out of it and said, we're going to be doing it by need. And to see what that means in neighborhoods that traditionally have not gotten that infrastructure. What we did on libraries and rec centers, bringing theirs up to their highest level of hours in over a decade. It was really and what we've done with after school programs, it was about putting neighborhoods first and communities first. I was proud of that. And as I said before, I really said, and I wanted to make sure that from the very, very beginning, we took an approach that my job as mayor was to be mayor for everybody. That's what One San Diego was all about. And I think, and again, that's how I approached it, and working with, my colleagues on the city council, again, with that demonstration of direct help and support, and really embracing the diversity of our city, because that's what makes us great. We are a city of immigrants. I proudly started the first Office of Immigrant Affairs, the first in city history, to embrace that and to say, how do we help folks and how do we help new Americans integrate not just into our city, but our business community, and celebrate that pride and diversity. So that's the way that I've approached being mayor. I think that's what you have to do to be successful. And I think that approach has served our city well.
Can we talk for a moment about national politics? You mentioned, the not very pleased with one party rule in the state of California, and a little bit about how challenging it's going to be for Republicans to gain a stronger foothold in helping manage the state. What do you think about the direction the national GOP is taking and the position that Donald Trump is trying to hang on to as leader of that party?
Well, like I said, we've had a different brand of party in California, and I've talked about that for a very long time in a number of years. And again, the national dialogue and the rhetoric, I think, has been unfortunate on both sides, Republican and Democrat. I've really tried to say that I think it's important that we solve problems. There's going to be a time for partisanship, certainly, but I think it's most importantly that says, what are you going to do to actually make our neighborhoods better? And I've said very clearly, in California, I don't believe that we can be a carbon copy of the national GOP. I think we have our own identity. We have to forge our own path. We have to be a party that is absolutely inclusive. We have to be a party that supports protecting our environment. We have to be a party that stands up for small businesses, public safety, and we have to have a party that realizes we are stronger together than separate. That's the way that I've tried to set my approach, certainly as mayor. And I think that's the best approach for the California Republican Party, that really, in a nutshell, that focuses on fixing real problems. Where are we in unemployment? Well, how come our schools aren't open? They should be open. How are we fixing our economy and protecting small businesses? I think when we focus on those issues, that's the key to success.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that? I don't want to make this an interview about Trump, but I do want to ask you, because John Wilkins raised this in his story where he quoted you as saying back in June 2016, I'd never vote for Trump. His divisive rhetoric is unacceptable and I just could never support him. And obviously in 2020, this year you did, saying, I thought he was the best person to help restore and energize our economy. Could you explain your Trump vote and the cynic, the punditry is saying that sets you up for a gubernatorial race, but why vote for Trump?
No, I answered John's question very directly. It was exactly that reason. I think it's incredibly important that coming out of COVID, that we have to focus on the economy and getting that back on track. And so that was the absolute primary reason. And I spent a lot of time, particularly during the pandemic, Matt, as you know, talking about the importance of saving lives and also saving livelihoods. And one of the things that I worried most about as we get on the other side, and we're in some very difficult times right now, but we have to have a business infrastructure for people to come back to. I think that's incredibly important in San Diego. It's incredibly important in California. And it's incredibly important for the country. And so that was my rationale. And I think increasingly when we get on the other side of this, we're going to have to work together, because the backbone of our economy in San Diego was small businesses. We're the 8th largest city in the country, 2nd largest city in the state. But it's our small business community that keeps us afloat and keeps us moving. And so that was my focus as mayor, and I think that's going to need to continue to be our focus.
Let me follow up on that. We've published a ton of amazing op-eds and commentaries from people on all aspects of the pandemic, but one that really stuck with me was a restaurant and bar owner who talked about, thoughts of suicide as the economic impact of this pandemic really hit his establishment.
It's real.
Could obviously all you gotta do is go in your own neighborhood and you can see outdoor dining, restaurants and other businesses hanging on. When you look back on this, is there anything you could have done differently, faster, better, or do you think you handled those difficult demands as well as you could have?
Yeah, we tried to jump in right away, and particularly on the small business aspect of it, Matt. One of the reasons why we pushed so hard immediately on providing relief to small businesses before the federal government even jumped in. Again, back to, we have to save lives and we have to save livelihoods, because that's just, and that those feelings that you just mentioned, individuals, that uncertainty, Matt, that anxiety, that is absolutely real. And you can't underestimate how powerful that is, and people wanting to do the right thing, people that have invested literally their life savings in this business and are worried that that's going to go away and they won't have any other recourse, and are looking to people at the local level, at the state level, to say, how can you help us? We jumped in very clearly under very difficult and uncertain circumstances. And again, I really tried to set the tone that we needed to be working closely, Matt, with our county and with our public health officials. And I think it was incredibly important that we set that tone. But it's also important that we take action. And so when we looked at not only the direct dollars that we provided for small businesses, but extending all of our building and parking permits, obviously extensions, putting a moratorium of evictions out there, utility shutoffs and late fees done. I mean, we're some of the first cities, as you know, that said you can go out in the street and the sidewalk, open for dining and retail, allowing classes to be out in our public parks or in parking lots. All of that was never been done. And let's just act, let's do it. Let's do everything that we can, that we've never been done before. Again, with that bias towards action. And, the relief that we did, I think, was helpful. Wish we could have done more. The relief we did with $1 million that went directly to our African-American business, I think at the time with our Chamber of Commerce, was incredibly helpful and important. But that's why I think you've also seen a lot of the anger and frustration when you've seen shifting. You're open, you're closed. It's okay to go to an outdoor playground, but then it's not okay to go to an outdoor playground. So I think that is, only fuels some of the uncertainty, the emotions, and the anxiety. But again, we really tried to say, we're all in this together. We need to help San Diegans, and we need to help our small businesses, because without that, if you don't have a place to go back to work after we get on the other side of this pandemic, that's a situation that none of us want to see. And it's not just an abstract question. It's very real.
Mr. Mayor, the Big Five proposal by Hassan Akrada uses 20th century technology at a time when technology is changing so rapidly that it seems bizarre to commit to fixed rail. It seems strange not to wait to see what the next few years yields. And yet it's gotten broad support, including in some ways from you. How does it make sense when we're on the verge potentially of self-driving cars and all kinds of other breakthroughs in energy to commit to something that uses technology from 100 years ago?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, I think, look, you need to be very realistic about what you're going to have and what you're not going to have. I would just back up. I thought it was incredibly important when we were making a change at Sandag, because we needed change several years ago, as you remember, that we bring in more transparency and accountability and put all of those plans out there. How are we going to use technology, Chris? How are we going to use vehicle share, ride share? To me, it's really been, not just about, high tech and other solutions. It's about how are we actually going to fix our roads to get people to where they need to be in San Diego, South County, North County, East County. How are we going to fix the streets? And so how are we going to make sure that people are spending less time in traffic, period, and more time with their families? So what is the right mix of that? Obviously, that will be all part of the plan as it works its way through. But as it works its way through, it's got to be a plan that is out there in the open and has to be realistic about how much it's going to cost. And that, I think, is going to be one of the most important hallmarks to see, how that plan moves forward in terms of something that can get community buy-in on projects that we need versus projects that some folks would just like to have.
But in the last 2 weeks, we've seen studies that say 40% of Americans are working from home. And as of yet, with some exceptions in some industries, there's no indication that there's been any drop in productivity. This is the future. We're living in the future now. So why do we continue to have 2015 notions guiding our transportation policy if 40% of us don't need to go to work and we're just as efficient? It's baffling to me that we're proceeding with plans in real time as their predicates are being undermined.
Well, I will tell you, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that the pandemic has been a game changer, Chris. And I think a lot of lessons that will be learned, what industries can continue to function remotely, what industries did okay, but not very, their highest and best use in terms of efficiency. But I think we have to factor all of that in to plans as we go forward to look at that. I think the reality is you have to plan for the future. We have to say, what is the type of transportation network that we need in San Diego and one that we can afford? And then let's have that public debate. But I would not be surprised, Chris, as we move forward in a post COVID-19 world, and we're all hoping to get there, that you'll see some changes and fluctuations in that, and I think rightfully so.
Mayor, you talked about community and public buy-in. Obviously, as mayor or as governor, using political capital is a huge part of the job to push forward projects or an agenda or ideas. It seemed like you had mixed success on that. Obviously, you were a big supporter of the Chargers. I said the name. They're in Los Angeles now. You're a big supporter of the convention center expansion, which didn't meet the threshold voters thought it needed. Talk to me a bit about that, about your ability to kind of, move the public on big projects like that. It seemed like, you didn't have the successes that you could have.
Well, it's always, I'm really proud of a lot of the things that we were able to get across the finish line, Matt. And I think on some of those, it's going to take a little longer. And I think the convention center is one of those. I think there's a very real possibility that will be approved, as you know, from some of the legal ramifications. And the fact, Matt, that we put that on the ballot, we got 65% of San Diegans that said we want to move forward on that. That had never been done before. So our job has been, it's never easy to build consensus, right? Particularly in times that have been so divisive. But what I really tried to do is, hopefully make some of the hard things look just a little bit easier. And that's been tried, that's the focus. But when I look at, some of the projects that we're able to get across the finish line that I think are going to be seminal for this city and I'm proud of, I think the convention center will get across the finish line. I think the work that we did on Mission Valley and what that's going to mean for San Diego State, what that's going to mean for a river park, what that's going to mean for housing in the heart of our city was incredibly important, and it wasn't easy. The work that we've done to set up us for success at the Midway and Sports Arena in terms of what that will be, I think is incredibly important. But I think those are some of the big projects that get attention. But I think it's also important to look at the things that we did that I really tried to stress. And when I ran for mayor, that I said, I'm going to stress on how we're actually going to increase neighborhood services. The fact that we paved half of our city streets when I'm mayor. My goal was to pave, 1,000 miles or less. We blew past that, and we were continuing to do that. The investments that we did in new fire stations and libraries and others that I think are incredibly important. That gets to our quality of life of San Diego, and how we do that. The focus on significant projects that weren't easy, like moving to community choice energy, where a lot of folks thought we would never be able to do that. Got that across the finish line. So you're always going to have successes. You're always going to have things that didn't work well. But again, what I really tried to do is set that tone of doing it together, particularly after some of the bitterness and divisiveness that existed in the city before I was mayor, to say, let's work together. Let's work together as a city council and so on. Just some of those, that I mentioned, I think was incredibly important. And I think as you go back, you can't underestimate how important it was that we get our finances back in order, Matt, because when I look at where we were, even back, years ago in the pension crisis and others, when this city was literally on the verge of bankruptcy. When I came into office, we had, as a council member, we had no reserves, virtually zero. And now they're the healthiest they've been. We've provided that transparency in the finances. And as you know, when we got the auditor approved, and I spent a lot of time on getting that, and then was proud to serve as the chairman of the city's audit committee, the first time we ever had an audit committee for 4 years, getting us out of where we were in the doghouse with the SEC. The city had no credit rating. We weren't able to do infrastructure. So I've spent a lot of time, not only as my career as a council person, but as mayor, insisting that we have those finances, because if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to provide the help and the support to city government. And I just think the last thing that goes part and parcel on that, which is how do you deliver services? We started the performance and analytics department. We started trying to use technology that actually modernizes local government. So our Get It Done app, has been phenomenally successful. And, that's now including all departments. So whether you can report a pothole, where you can put, trash or litter, where you can part something that's going, what's going on in your neighborhood, increasingly out of the palm of your hand now is where government is going to be run. And we really, my goal was, how do we create a government that's as innovative as the people that we are in San Diego? So how do we do that? So, you can get a permit now, you can do, all of that. And I think that was incredibly important. But lastly, because you talk about big projects, and a project that a lot of us, all of us, with your help and support, that we put a lot of time into, was our relationship with Mexico, and our particularly trying to get funds once and for all to fix the disasters that has been the Tijuana River Valley. I made our relationship with Mexico a priority from day one. And I vividly remember when I was getting interviewed the first week as mayor, it was my second day in office. Somebody's interviewing me and said, well, the mayor is traveling to Mexico today to meet the mayor of Tijuana. And I said, no, I'm not traveling to Mexico. I'm going next door to see my neighbor. And that was the spirit and the tone of which I really tried to tell that story of success, because our relationship with Mexico, it's not about San Diego and Tijuana, it's about one region. I really tried to elevate that during my time as mayor. And when I fast forward to the end and the work that we did, bipartisan work on getting USMCA across the finish line, the work we did on the binational mayors, which I chaired, restarted that. And to have that achievement when we had bipartisan congressional delegation support for $300 million for the Tijuana River Valley, that's one of our most egregious environmental problems that has plagued our region for literally decades. We are on the cusp of solving that now. So a lot of big things, Matt, that require a lot of people rowing in the same direction. And that's the tone and the spirit that I tried to do. I think San Diego is leading. We're leading on homelessness. We're leading on climate action. We've continued to be leaders on fiscal reform. And I tried to do it in a way that set aside partisanship and tried to say, we can do this together. It takes collaboration, it takes cooperation. But again, my focus has always been on, let's actually get something accomplished. Let's actually have the solutions. And I think when you do that, that's your best opportunity for success.
Yeah. Let's spend a little bit more time on climate, because obviously the city's climate action plan is held up as a kind of pioneering document. But no, over time, the city hasn't really hit its marks. It's going to have to go in and look under the hood and see where it can and how it can do that. That's obviously a legally binding document,
Yeah.
and people who put it together deserve a lot of credit. But is there a worry that the city isn't in a good place to meet those targets?
No, I think the city is in a good place. And again, when we put the climate action plan together, we try to put it together into a document that will actually work, that will have buy-in. And as you know, we had both the environmental community and the Chamber of Commerce together in the same room, because we care about the environment in San Diego, and we want to have a plan that's enforceable and a plan that can work. And so I think we're in very good shape. And you're right that document is enforceable, and that was incredibly important. And the fact that we've had our greenhouse gases that have been down by nearly 24% in the last 4 years, I think that's important. I think it's also important the steps that we took on community choice energy, which I mentioned earlier. A lot of folks said, oh, you'll never do that. Well, it was the right call to do that, for greener energy, to actually have people save money on their bills going forward, and to give San Diegans that choice out of a monopoly that has existed for years. That's a sea change in San Diego, and we're one of the statewide leaders on that. And again, we did that by bringing Democrats and Republicans together. And so I think that the fact that we got that approved, I think, speaks volumes. And I also think what we're doing in terms of pure water to help protect from a sustainability standpoint and to control our own destiny, our water supply. We have seen what has happened in times of drought when we are literally at the end of the pipe, right, from Los Angeles and the State Water Project, that we have to be able to protect our own supply. And for us to be able to now create a third of our water supply from recycled water, one of the largest recycled water projects in California history, I think again speaks volumes of San Diegans are really willing to be innovative. They're willing to spend dollars to help protect that. It's the right thing for the environment, obviously for our outfall, and it's the right thing for us to recycle that water. So when I look at how we've been able to do things, to me, it's not about just talking about the environment or virtue signaling about the environment. It's about how do we actually get policies approved and set our city up for the long term. And I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to do in that.
Mayor, I know we're going to run out of time pretty quickly, but I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on the Black Lives Matter movement. Switching gears a little bit, San Diego kind of fared well in terms of looking at what happened in other bigger cities across the US. But what do you hope happens from here?
Well, I think we did fare well. And I really tried to set that tone of we need to work together as a city. And again, we need to work together on reforms, and we need to work together on positive change. And it takes all of us doing that, and it takes all of us recognizing that. And I brought leaders and community leaders in my office, and African-American leaders, to say, what is it that we should be doing in San Diego? What are the changes that we need to make, not just now, but into the future? And so when some of those changes came out, and I said some of the leadership from our police department with my strong support, it's about listening. It's about listening to ideas. It's about listening to changes. It's about listening to reforms. We have a lot of work to do in San Diego. We have a lot of work to do in California. But I thought it was important from the very beginning that, particularly in those early weeks, that we demonstrate a capacity to change the way we are doing things. Some of the things that we did on 8 Can't Wait and others, some of the issues we did on ensuring that our officers have a duty to intervene, those are important changes. Those are important reforms. And I tried to set that tone of reform, and tried to set that tone of we're all in this together. And if our city is going to move forward together, we need to move forward with everyone at the table. That's the challenge, not just for now, but that's obviously the challenge going forward in the years to come.
So speaking now as an outsider who's been an insider, looking at the way the system operates, the way the city is run in general, what did you find to be the impediments to getting the things done that you wanted to accomplish? What were the hurdles that you just couldn't get over?
Yeah, it's always the bureaucracy, the time it takes. It's just always, change is never easy. And just to having to letting perfect be the enemy of the good. I really tried to put an end to that. And it's about trying to say yes, as I said, yes to policy reforms, a lot of the things that we've talked about today. And sometimes there's a tendency that you focus on policies, but you need to focus on people. And it's about people, not politicians. It's about, how do we actually engage San Diegans and do it in a way that focuses on, let's try to move forward. I'd like to think that one of the strengths that we were able to do was that we did set that tone of, let's focus on results. Let's try to get it across the finish line. And treating people as equals. I was a former council member, and I knew it was important for me to work closely with the council from day one. And so the way we did that, I think, was important. But I will tell you, it just never, it always takes more time than you think it's going to take because of a lot of the rules and bureaucracy. But I was constantly pushing against that during my tenure.
How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, it's hard. I'm starting to reflect. It's only been 2 weeks, but hopefully as somebody who brought some pride back to our city, hopefully a mayor that brought people together in a very difficult time. I will tell you, it's been a real privilege and honor for me to serve in this role as somebody who, when I was cleaning carpets in the city way back when, and for me to raise my family here. I have my kids in public schools, and just to have the opportunity for a brief period of time to lead the city and to hopefully do it, as I said, to treat people with dignity and respect, to get results, and to make the city a better place than when I came in. I'm confident that we did that. There's always more that you wish you would have done, but I really tried to put that focus on faith and integrity and moving San Diego forward. Like I said, it's just been a real privilege of a lifetime, and one that I feel very fortunate to have been able to do.
Well, thanks for your time today, Mayor. I really appreciate it. I'm sure it won't be the last time we're talking to you, but I appreciate you taking some time during this unusual holiday season to be with us and answer our questions.
Matt, thank you. And thank you to each and every one of you. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy Festivus.
Happy holidays.
See you, Mayor. Take care.